Outlast 2 is a game I have mixed feelings about. On one hand, it is an evolution of the first game, but at the same time, in pursuit of trying to refine and evolve the game and design, they overlook quite a few things that made the first game so loved. Not only are we in a new setting, but it's a completely different kind of setting, taking place outside in forests and so on. You take control of Blake Langermann, the husband and cameraman of a reporter named Lynn Langermann. You two go to a small settlement in Arizona called Temple Gate, where you're investigating the suspected murder of a pregnant woman. Once again, the truth is much deeper and darker than anyone expected, and the settlement forces Blake to confront a demon that has made home deep within him. 2013's Outlast was a massive success, mostly through the YouTube scene. So in October 2014, Red Barrels announced that a sequel was in development. They let players know immediately that they would be going to a completely different setting. Despite this, they would use an identical approach to this game as they did to the first. In January 2015, it was stated that the game was very much based on the 1978 Jonestown mass suicide. From that, it was easy to put together that this game would have even stronger religious imagery than the first. In PAX 2016, a demo was showcased and released. Roughly a month prior to release, the Australian Classification Board refused to give the game a rating. The reason for this is that they felt that the game's grotesque sexual violence was a bit too much. Without a rating, the game couldn't be sold in Australia regardless of whether it's banned or not. The decision was eventually reversed. On April 25, 2017, the game was officially released. It was met with mixed reviews. Some people found it to be an improvement with some flaws. The imagery in the game is really what carried the horror to a lot of people. Others liked the story but found that the level design and gameplay to be frustratingly incompatible. Most compliments went to the thematic, story and imagery, whereas most criticism went to the technical aspects themselves. The design was good, but the game itself came with many noticeable flaws. Let's get into it. As the game starts, you hear a scared girl trying to escape a man that you can hear chuckle in the background. That's when Blake wakes up in the helicopter. Lynn is not happy with him sleeping on the job. Then she mentions that he called out the name Jessica, which first has her suspicious. Then he says that he dreamt of a childhood friend of them both named Jessica Gray. She's the one you heard a minute ago. It's evident that something very bad happened to her. As the pilot gets to the area, they're puzzled with how empty it is. They were expecting to see heavy industry due to a high mercury concentration in the dead woman's blood. Blake and Lynn decides to record the intro in the helicopter, and they begin talking about how it should be. Then this flash comes out of nowhere and seemingly blasts you out of the sky. Panic ensues as you fall, then title screen. As you fade back in, you're in a school hallway looking at a crucifix. This is St. Sybil Catholic School, which Blake, Lynn, and Jessica attended as children. As you begin walking, Jessica's locker opens to you. As you round the corner, you see a man walk away at the far end. As you walk on, this ethereal choir builds. Eventually, its dissonance becomes noticeable and reverb screaming also comes in, immediately giving it a hellish feel. This is supposed to be a holy place and looks so on the surface, but what happened to Jessica here was horrible. It's reflected nicely in the score. When you reach the far end, the door is shut in your face and you turn around to see Jessica as blood floods the hallway in a visual inspired by The Shining. Blake wakes up on the ground after the crash. He spots the wreck just down the cliff. When you get down there, there's no sign of Lynn or the pilot. Here you're introduced to the recording feature. It's cool that you're able to watch back the recordings, but I do prefer just having a normal looking camera screen and then have the character note. You don't have to walk very far to find the pilot. He's been brutally murdered and hung up for show. This is obviously very startling to Blake, who gets increasingly more worried about Lynn. By the way, the same rules to the camera apply to the camera in this game. You can collect batteries, which powers the night vision. I also like how the inventory is just Blake looking into his chest pockets. In this game, you also collect bandages, which you can use to stop bleeding when taking damage. After walking through these rocky ravines, you show up at a little farmstead with a church in the distance. Blake is relieved upon finding it. This is a really cool shot with the full moon illuminating the quiet, dark village. You try and knock on the door, but get no response. As you continue, you begin to hear shuffling leaves, and you can even make out silhouettes in the dark. As you get in here, you find a fresh body with a suicide note. The man had to give up his kids and couldn't live on. He does see it as necessary for a Father Sullivan North, who seems to be the leader of the settlement. You quickly notice how religious everything is, which definitely makes Blake think of Saint Sybil. You still see various inhabitants that don't look too friendly. Upon being seen, they slowly back into the darkness. Screaming begins filling the night. You get in here where you find a note under a picture of Father North. It's written by a woman who had a dream that really got her going for North. However, to her, she needs to strangle the Antichrist in her womb. There is clearly some very strange things going on, and these people seem to be brainwashed into following this North guy. Just outside, you can find a memorial to some kids that are no more. When you find out that you can open windows, which is used for a cheap jump scare, you can search people's houses and use them as hiding spots. You can also lock the doors. You get past the fence and end up on this road with crosses. You hear shuffling in the dark. Eventually, you get to this door with Satan, enemy of God, written in Latin. Here, they could have used a voiced protagonist to translate it for the player, but they don't. Blake just says something. Upon walking inside, you find a bloodied cradle next to some song lyrics about killing the Antichrist as a baby. When you walk further, you find this pit filled with dead babies. This is the level of extremism we're dealing with here. When you leave, you walk past a rocking horse and these swings. This is a thing we're gonna see quite a bit. The devs put stuff in just because it's like super scary rather than serving any kind of purpose or being a product of the setting. As you get to this gate, you find out that you can go prone in this game. After getting back up on the other side, you hear a raspy voice reciting Bible verses. This is when you see Martha for the first time. She's this tall woman in a cloak that's carrying a pickaxe around. She's a close friend of North and acts as an enforcer by killing the non-believers. Her chase music is creepy as fuck. You get into this barn where you learn to push objects around so you can climb higher. Up here you can find an excerpt from North's own writings. You fall down, and after picking your glasses back up, you're face to face with Martha. She asks if you want God. Then she says you'll have him and backs into the night. After entering this house, you learn to use your camera's directional mic to see where a sound is coming from or hear it more clearly. People are speaking outside. It's the villagers. When they see you, they attack. Then the light that tore you from the sky returns. It puts the villagers into a sort of trance state where they keep speaking of violence and death of children. You find a note that elaborates more on these visions. It would seem that it's this light that's the root of it. Also, how Blake gets transported into his past like that. Shortly after, Noth speaks through a PA all over the village. He repeats the whole thing about killing the Antichrist, then it's revealed that he has Lynn with him, and they believe her to be the mother of the Antichrist. You enter this chapel where a sermon is ongoing and Lynn is present. You go into the cellar where various enemies of Noth's cult are imprisoned. We hear that this other group wants Lynn to have the child, but Noth's guys want to kill it. On the other side, you get back up, you go upstairs where you can hear Lynn struggle. When you get to the far side, you see Lynn escape through a window and you quickly jump down to meet her. You both agree that the best course of action is to escape this strange place. Lynn begins getting these sudden bursts of pain in her gut as you get down to this little river. Noth comes back on the PA and announces that Lynn is pregnant. He rallies the townsmen to find you and kill you. They do find you shortly after, but before you can do anything, these ghoulish-looking people called heretics attack Noth's cultists. They're led by a woman named Val. They want Lynn to have the child. The heretics is at war with Noth's cult. Val licks you a bit before you get knocked out. Now you gotta figure out where they took Lynn. You get this pretty cool section where you gotta walk through the water as villagers patrol the piers and then submerge to avoid the flashlights. When you walk back up and into this house, the light comes again. When it fades, you're in a music room in St. Sybil's school. The school sections are actually my favorite. It's the one time that this game goes back to where Outlast is strongest, in a big, cramped, claustrophobic complex. It's worth mentioning that Blake experiences this as if he's actually there back in time and not as a vision or dream. When going into the adjacent room, you see what appears to be a suicide note from Jessica on the blackboard. You find a picture of Lynn, Jess, and you in the 4th grade. Out in the hallways is really where the idea of this place begins to take shape. It relies a lot on liminal space horror. We've all been at school or somewhere that's usually crowded after dark and been hit by an eerie emptiness. As you walk on, this faint echoing and rhythmic banging can be heard. It's creepy, but I would have preferred if the only sound was the buzzing of the lights and Blake's footsteps. In here, the TV turns to static on its own because, it's like super scary. This next part, though, did actually get under my skin a bit. You see a man at the end of the hallway who then suddenly charges at you before disappearing. You walk out into the snowstorm and through this door before falling back into reality. This guy walks up to you. Thankfully, he's nice and gives you shelter. He's got no allegiance to either side. After Noth forced himself on his daughter and made him kill her, he didn't do it and she ran. Turns out the girl was Jane Doe, the one whose murder we're here to investigate. He has no idea that she's dead, and Blake lies and tells him that as far as he knows, she's alive. Ethan lets you hide and rest under the floor. You fall asleep and have another dream about Jessica. You're suddenly awoken by Marta entering Ethan's house. He insists that he isn't hiding anything, and Marta just keeps on with her cryptic Bible rambling. The exchange gets increasingly heated until Marta kills Ethan with her pickaxe. Marta leaves you and you can get back up from the floor. You heard Marta talk about the chapel, so that's where you need to go. Someone there will know where the heretics have taken Lynn. You continue through this river where you see the tenants go about their day. After passing another grisly sight, you arrive at this cornfield. You see Marta pass at the far end with another body talking about how pregnant women should be ripped up. What follows is actually a really cool section. You have to sneak through the crops while the cultists look for you with their flashlights. Your only way of knowing where they are is by the beam of the flashlight. You really do feel lost in a maze here, and it's one of the only examples besides the school where a similar atmosphere to the first game begins to shine through. You get back out on the other side. After passing through this little neighborhood, you get to a barn. While going through, the owner shows up with his flashlight. You climb up top, and just before making it out, a piece of meat smacks you onto this pile of gore. You need to get back to the village. Doesn't take that long for you to get blasted with light again. The bridge ahead is broken, so you'll have to go around. You go up this cliff and through this cave. Due to the game's openness, you traverse entire areas without feeling threatened or watched, and pretty calm actually. In the first game, you never knew when the next enemy would show. You could round a corner and boom, there they are. Here it's like entire sections are just dedicated to looking at stuff around the place. Granted, this game is gorgeous. You walk through a temple that has a very primitive hunter-gatherer look. After getting out on the other side, you begin to hear Jessica in the dark. When approaching this tree, you see her body dangle before it disappears. So far, it seems that something led to Jessica ending her own life, though many things point to her actually having been murdered. Shortly after, you spot the chapel in the distance. You make it down into this little basement. Outside the house, the villagers are still looking for you. You find an elevator, but you'll have to restart the power. You walk through the village, dodging the hostile villagers. This part is honestly pretty cool. The tension of not knowing who is hostile keeps you on edge. After turning on the generator, you get jump scared before making your way back to the elevator. Things seem to go fairly well, but then Marta shows up and begins the chase. You hurry into the elevator and begin ascending. At the top, you've gotten closer to the chapel. You see this sign that shows that Temple Gate was settled in 1971. You begin to hear some singing coming from a well. Upon looking in, this tongue comes out and pulls you in. You end up in the school's vents. Jessica begs Blake to do something when the vent collapses. Jessica says they're not alone here and that he's coming. It begins to seem like Blake feels that he could have done something to prevent her death. This next part is pretty damn eerie. You walk down the dark hallways as you hear a laugh echo through the dark quiet. Jessica's pleading becomes more desperate. You see her pass this door frame, and when you walk into the next hallway, you see her body hanging in the far side. She's dragged into the ceiling. I must say the game is beginning to rely a little too much on general horror cliches. It has had some good moments, but it's starting to get way too predictable. When entering the music class, you get back to reality. This machete-wielding dude attacks you and throws you down the stairs. Now the chase is on. This part actually has some very cool moments as well, like crawling through this crawl space with a pursuer right on your heels. Eventually you get into this nursery where you block the door. Then you have this cat and mouse game where you use the beds to sneak past this guy. The pursuit picks back up, but you escape into this little dugout. In here you find a woman chained to a bed. After crossing this spike pit, you re-emerge in another basement. The pursuit picks up again as you run through the village and through more crawl spaces. Eventually, you end up in another basement. When you get up, you're in some kind of classroom with their final message for the kids on the blackboard. Don't be afraid, you're going to heaven. Next, you have this part where you have to push this cart to the door while Marta is patrolling. The idea of it is nice, but I question whether they touched the AI at all since the last game. The way I got past her was by just pushing the cart. Marta walked past a mere 10 meters behind me and didn't react at all. It's as if the AI is having trouble properly assessing a bigger area. Anyways, Marta does grab you when you're about to hop over. You make it across though. After a short walk through this dark neighborhood, you make it to the chapel. There's something so menacing about the way it looks as you approach. Inside, you find this guy tied to a wheel. He's been tortured by Noth, and he says you have to kill him because when Noth returns, he'll have his wife, I think, a woman named Mary. He's gonna hurt her and then he'll talk. If he's dead, Noth wouldn't have a reason to hurt her. As Noth returns with the woman, you'll have to hide in the confessionals. You'll see Noth enter with Mary, and Noth begins his interrogation. After a while, the man finally tells Noth that Val has taken Lynn up the mountain to the mines. They kill him after. Now you need to get to the mine to find Lynn. You walk through the dark town and another cornfield before getting to this water mill. To progress here, you'll have to stop the wheel. You do so by attaching this lever to this gate mechanism and closing the water flow. You go through this little opening and evade the hunters. Then you run into Marta. Here you'll have to retrieve a hook from this slaughterhouse to open this heavy gate. After going through, you see the mine. You climb into this house with crosses and plop straight into the school hallway. Blake says this is before he found her hanging. It would seem that he goes further and further back in time. Here you have to do this puzzle where you gotta line up a game of hangman with this whiteboard, which ends up spelling the word unforgivable. By the way, the whole school just makes you so uneasy. You feel followed and watched all the time. The sound design is really good too. It's just this slow, rhythmic wooden banging. When you make your way further down the halls, you begin to see this shadowy figure with many limbs. At the same time, you hear this moany chuckle. After hiding in this locker, you get jump scared by this hideous monster. Now you can find this opening in the ceiling and climb into the vent. Eventually, this tongue grabs your leg. When you get free, you're back in the mountains. This is where the Genesis chapter ends. While crossing this bridge, you get swarmed with these bugs and you end up falling down and hanging in this tree. You hear someone approach. This is Nick and Laird. Laird is sort of the leader of a group called the Scald. They're a plagued outcast from Noth's cult, however, they remain loyal to him. Laird uses bow and arrow, making him the only antagonist with ranged weapon. Nick walks around with a lantern, spotting enemies. You follow the river and go down in another ravine. You make it to where the Scald have settled. They're genuinely creepy. They're very sick and are almost walking corpses. They make these pained moans and throw up randomly. Very unsettling. Eventually you run into armed enemies. You sneak through the rotting village until you see Nick and Laird again. They're up to some very mean things. While trying to scale this cliff, a creepy guy pushes you off and you fall down to where you just saw Nick and Laird walk by. After walking a bit, the Scald begins to chase you, and after squeezing through here, you get back to the school. You're in a locker. watching the same man we've been seeing here walk away. When leaving the locker, you see Jess run around the corner. After turning a few corners, you get to this corridor with these fleshy things that appear and then disappear. After that, you hear kids and a man sing the same song you heard from the well. After getting up into the ceiling, you're back in a log at Temple Gate. When leaving, you get taken by the Scald. Laird suspects that you're some kind of messiah and makes you drink his blood. He calls you the Scald Messiah and begins dragging you off. They're gonna have you give them your teachings, nail you to a cross, bury you, and then you'll rise again. They're gonna crucify you, 'cause that's like super hardcore. Laird grabs your camera and calls it your gospel. Then they nail you on the cross and put it up. Blake tears himself from the cross. It's clear that this is supposed to be this game's trigger snipping your fingers moment. I guess it's fairly effective. I mean, I did cringe at it. Now you gotta find some bandages to stop the bleeding. You'll have to sneak around this campfire to get it. After that, you can climb up here. After walking a bit more, you slide into this little body of water. Here you'll have to duck as Nick scans the surface with his lantern. Shortly after, you find Laird's house and your camera. As you pick it up, you're back in the cafeteria of St. Sybil. You see something cross the door frame as those fleshy blobs return. You hear a phone ring and follow the sound. Then the flesh blobs come back as the hideous monster comes after you. After running a bit, you realize it has vanished. You return to the phone and pick up. The man starts by telling you to hide, but then he immediately gets hostile by asking how it felt when Jess's neck broke. Then a tongue comes out of the phone, which I'm pretty sure is referencing A Nightmare on Elm Street. When you leave now, the monster gives chase for real. This is the inner demon. The inner demon is Blake's psychological manifestation of a man named Loudermilk. Father Loudermilk was a music teacher at this school and is clearly the one who murdered Jess. Even at this point in the game, it's pretty clear even though you don't know his name yet. It chases you down the hall, and when you hide in Jessica's locker, you're back at Laird's house. Pretty soon, he begins shooting at you from outside. Nick and Laird chase you through the cliffs until you slide down into this barbed wire. They get you again. This time they're gonna bury Blake to record his resurrection. They put you in a casket and put dirt on. Thankfully, Nick and Laird aren't very competent grave diggers, so they only bury you below a few centimeters of dirt. You get out quite easily. Now you wander back into the darkness to get to the mine. That's where we're going, in case you forgot. Walking here, you start to hear weird creeping sounds, only to discover that some of the Scald are crawling after you on the forest floor. You quickly make it to another camp. Here you see this body swing. When watching the footage back, it becomes clear that Blake's flashbacks and the present are melting together in his brain as he recalls how Loudermilk hung Jess's body to make it look like a suicide. You've gotten rather close to the mine now, but you gotta get down on the shore and find a way to cross the lake. To do this, you have to get a rope so you can lower yourself. This brings, honestly, one of the most stressful moments in the game. You have to sneak through a town full of hostile Scald to retrieve it from this body. They patrol the dark streets. Eventually, Nick and Laird begins chasing you and you're on your way back. As you descend, they break down the door and begin to pull you up. It would seem however, that the Scald are fed up with Laird's constant berating, so they push the two of them down through the hatch, and all three of you plummet to the beach below. They died, but you survived. When you crawl out of these ruins, you emerge on the school rooftop. You walk across the cold, quiet rooftop until you find an open door. You go down this staircase but see a silhouette of the demon below. After getting back up, you run into the real demon who chases you down the stairs. You get out to the courtyard, which is also covered in snow. After climbing into this hatch, the demon starts chasing you again. You emerge in the cafeteria where this Muriel begins shining as it grows out of the wall. You're pulled into a dark void where you see Jessica run away, and you have to follow her through the dark. Eventually, her hanging corpse jump scares you as her screams fade. You come to in this cave. This is where the second chapter called Job ends. This is where you cross the lake. After watching this guy walk into the water, you begin walking along the shore. While walking up here, you spot what seems to be a relay tower in the distance, a reminder of the world outside. After climbing through the cliffs, you find a raft to row across on. You row onto the lake as a mist slowly descends upon you. I love this whole raft section. It's so ominous with the mist and the blackened water. With all the insanity of this place, you just don't know what to expect. Whenever they do these parts that have a certain shtick, like rowing a raft or navigating the cornfields, it's always really well done, but it's so spaced out with those walking sim sections. Eventually the flash returns with the tongue this time, followed by dead fish floating to the surface. A giant wave knocks you off the raft and you have to hurry back before whatever's in the water can get you. The demon does grab your leg, but you make it back on the raft. Now you make it to this river where you have to dodge these rocks as the current pulls you forward. Going downstream, it's pretty menacing to see the silhouettes of heretics hop around on the surrounding forest. In the meantime, Blake gets even more worried since the heretics want Lynn to have the baby, so when there isn't a baby, what will they do? Eventually you crash into a rock and you're forced to go along the cliffs to find the raft again. You see the various displays of violence set up by the heretics until they make their appearance. You make it back on the raft. As you continue, they begin to throw rocks at you and end up scoring a hit. Eventually, the raft breaks completely, and you have to escape the heretics through waist-high water. Eventually, a tongue comes up and drags you into the river. Now you're at the bottom of a pool, and the demon is coming right for you. You climb out. You traverse the pool and end up in the girls' locker room. In here, a shower is spraying blood out onto the floor as you hear hard banging on the bathroom stall. Here something becomes quite clear. We basically have our two flashback characters, Jessica and Loudermilk. The game strongly alludes to Loudermilk being sexually abusive towards Jessica. The setting in the girl's room combined with the banging on the stall doors as if someone is trying to force their way in. The imagery here is also very well made. You have a very sterile looking school environment and the red blood pours onto it like paint on a fresh canvas. Eventually the demon begins chasing you again and you have this jump scare where it's suddenly in front of you. Eventually, Jess's screaming fills the halls again as the sprinklers spray blood all over the hallway. I think the blood is supposed to be a very in-your-face representation of Blake's feelings of guilt, having been present the night Jess died. He feels that Jessica's blood isn't just on his hands, but sprayed all over him. You get to this ladder, and when you get to the top, you have arrived at the mine. This is where the third chapter, called Lamentations, ends. Outside, you're met with a peculiar sight, blood rain. The atmosphere gets very hellish with the constant red tinge. If you turn on night vision, you can see that it's actually just regular rain, but Blake is hallucinating blood rain. You walk past mutilated and skinned bodies until you get inside, where the door suddenly shuts and body parts come tumbling at you. You can hear the heretics whisper as well as and see signs of their presence, like these hooks that swing as if someone just came through. In here, one of Noth's men jump out at you. He says they tried to get Lynn back, but it didn't go well. The lucky ones, as he says, were killed immediately, alluding to the brutality of the heretics. Then he stresses that you must go now. You squeeze through here, and on the other side you find yourself in St. Sybil Library. You go to the computer lab first, though. Here you read some chat logs between Jess and Blake. You find out that Jessica was also abused at home. She's been talking to another Catholic about dealing with abusive parents. Shortly after, all screens begin to flicker. You leave and see Jessica enter the girls' locker room. You go there only to be ambushed by the demon. When trying to return to the locker room, the tongue takes you with it into the pool and you wake up in a blood pool by the mine. You must make your way to the top where you can enter. You squeeze back inside. The heretics have found you, however. They are probably the most menacing enemies in the game with their outfits and the growling and shrieking they do. The game begins to play with you here. The heretics are patrolling the whole area so you can hear them groan and march around even if they aren't a threat to you in this exact moment. This whole section is probably the most unnerving in the game. Eventually you do encounter them properly. This, however, is like a big chase sequence. Eventually you escape through this window and when you hang on the opposite side, you're once again back in St. Sybil, as the roar of the light returns. You climb back in to see multiple Jessicas hanging in the courtyard. While approaching this crucifix, it falls off as blood pours out of the wall. After walking around a bit, you make it to the library. This section is another part that I absolutely love. The demon appears at the far end and you run back only to find that the library has turned into a seemingly endless maze of bookshelves as the demon chases you. I feel this perfectly captures how a child would probably feel if an insane music teacher was chasing them, like this massive, endless ocean of dead ends and paranoia, feeling completely lost in fear. Eventually you get to this pile of books. On the other side you find more library. When approaching this light, the demon returns and chases you again. You see Jessica run off and hear her cry. When squeezing through here, you're pulled back to reality by this heretic. Now you're in this room. You climb higher and higher while the heretics continue to shriek. When you get to the very top, you slide into this opening right on top of Jessica's body. Her face is bloodied and her neck is broken. On top of the stairs stands the demon. He chases you into the bathroom where you have to hide in the stalls. The demon will try to enter while singing the song that we've gotten to know so well over the course of the game. You gotta crawl between the stalls. When it seemingly leaves, you do too, but the chase is picked up again. Now you wander the hallways while Loudermilk tries to comfort you. It seems as if Blake ended up witnessing what happened, prompting Loudermilk to go after him. These must be the words that were spoken to him after the chase. You get to a ransacked classroom with another game of hangman. You hop out the window and you're back at the mine. After more climbing and running, from the heretics you get to the elevator and call it. But it shows up with more heretics that you gotta outrun. After outmaneuvering them, you can enter the elevator and begin descending into the mine. This is where the Judges chapter ends. The elevator breaks, however, and you plummet deep inside the mine. The mine is actually really cool. It has the cram layout of Mount Massive, but more worn down and filthy. It's also swarming with heretics down here. You begin to hear Lynn struggling in the distance. As you descend deeper, you hear Laudermilch's words and begin to hallucinate the inner demon. When the heretics begin being a threat to you, you lose orientation rather quickly. It's so easy to get lost or turned around down here. You make your way to these stairs that go further and further down as you begin to hear Laudermilch sing the song he's been singing throughout the game. It all feels very confrontational in that soon Blake must confront the heretics as well as the demon inside him. It becomes increasingly clear that Blake's perception of reality is melting together with the flashbacks, since he will routinely talk as if he's back in St. Sybil, even when he's not in a flashback. As you hop down here, you get grabbed by some heretics as Val approaches. She tells you that she will show you her true face by putting on this mask. That makes her look like the other heretics. The mine begins crumbling around you, however, and the heretics let go and you must escape Val. You run until rubble blocks you in. Then you get this really cool section where you gotta avoid Val while shutting down the power so you can continue. You're in water and you gotta crouch to hide from her light. It's so menacing to see the torch's light appear around the corner, knowing you must hide now. You get out and continue to another part of the mine. You go even deeper. Val shows up again and you run until this board breaks and you fall further down. This part is very reminiscent of the end of the sewer level in the first game. It's dark and open. You gotta find a way out. After a small walk, you find Lynn in this room full of heretics getting it on. You get this powder blown in your face that makes you all woozy and the camera is taken away. Val climbs on top of you and pins you to the floor, which immediately sends you back to St. Sybil, where Blake and Jessica are play fighting. She makes Blake admit defeat before they leave hand in hand. They talk about crushes and tease each other as they wander the dark halls. Eventually they bump into Laudermilch. He wants to know why you're still here before he asks you to enter the classroom. He makes Jessica stay and pray with him to make it right. He forces Blake to leave as Jess gets more and more panicked. It's very evident what he's up to, considering everything we've seen, combined with the really uncomfortable way he's touching her. She begs Blake to stay, but he's forced to leave. When you've made it a good bit down the hall, you hear Jessica scream and turn around to see her running from Laudermilch. You follow them as Jess continues to scream. You hear them struggle, and when you get into the staircase, you find Jessica inches from death at the bottom of the stairs with Laudermilch standing over her. I don't know what you think you saw, is what he says as you fade back into the mine. You see Father Noth's goon slaughter the heretics and you run away. Now we get to the final chapter. After running through the crumbling mine, you find Lynn by the exit, in late-stage pregnancy, despite only having been pregnant for a few hours. Blake still calls Lynn Jessica during the recordings and says they need to find a grown-up. The storm picks up, so you take shelter down here, though down here Marta awaits and begins chasing you. Eventually she corners you, but as the storm gets increasingly violent, before Marta can strike, a cross is blown off the top of a church and impales Marta through the torso, causing her to pass away. You continue through the storm until you reach the chapel from earlier. Here Lynn goes into labor and gives birth to a baby. Before she passes away, she says there's nothing there, as Blake holds the baby. He breaks down next to her, and we fade into another memory. Jessica is teasing Blake with the fact that he hasn't kissed Lynn for a school play yet. This is what leads to them play fighting like in the previous flashback. When you come to, Noth is sitting with you. He says you've murdered Paradise since the child is now too strong to be stopped. He says God has gone silent and emphasizes all the messed up things he's done to show his messed up faith. He tells you to destroy the child before slitting his own throat. Outside, the sun has risen and there's an ethereal choir without the hellish noises accompanying. The whole town lays dead. Blake seems to believe that in saving the child, he is basically saving Jessica. The sun expands and you're thrust back to school. But it feels different. It's brighter and Jessica sounds happy. You run after her until you get to this storage area, where Jessica says she'll never let Blake go because he never let her go. Then they pray. There's something quite emotional about the ethereal choir together with the brightness and Jessica's smile knowing what's about to happen to the two, but also that Blake has finally let go of the guilt he feels about the situation, and this is where the game ends. Like I said, I have very mixed feelings about this game. On one hand, it has truly nerve-wracking sections and incredible imagery, but the game itself and the environment is missing so much of what made the original stand out. Mount Massive was cramped and claustrophobic. You had to navigate the maze-like corridors, praying there's nothing around the next corner. Here you spend most of your time in big open areas. You don't feel trapped with the monsters and people. Also, the hide-and-seek elements are almost completely removed, replaced with scripted chase sequences. The parts that are supposed to be hide-and-seek are often designed in a way that makes it possible to just run straight through. You also have very long walks where nothing happens, and due to the fact that you can see all around, you don't feel on edge in these parts. Where the game shines to me is in its imagery. The blood rain, the chapel in the dark, and at the end when the morning sun reveals a dead village. The school sections are also really well done in my opinion. Here the game goes back to the cram interior design, but with a distinct liminal space quality that expand on what the first game did. Here you also feel constantly on edge. The inner demon is also just really fucking creepy even outside the context of what it represents. Let's piece together what happened at that school to Jessica. So basically Blake and Jessica are hanging out after hours. I didn't really catch why they were there at that time, but that's irrelevant right now. They play a game of catch and Blake chases Jessica into this storage room. They're having lots of fun and stuff. They end up talking about a coming school play where Blake has to kiss Lynn. It's clear that Blake likes Lynn already here. Anyways, they leave hand in hand and walk the halls of St. Sybil. This is when they bump into Loudermilk. Things immediately get uncomfortable. He tells Blake he's not in trouble and tells him to go home. He makes Jessica stay, telling her they need to make it right. Here is when the abuse begins to show. The way Loudermilk touches Jessica and the fact that the inner demon has the whole tongue motif, where it only grabs you with its tongue. It's heavily implied that the abuse is sexual. Jessica begs Blake to stay, but Blake leaves due to Loudermilk's sudden aggressive demeanor. Before Blake leaves the building, he hears Jessica scream for him to help her. He turns around to see her run with Loudermilk right behind her. Blake follows them into the stairwell where he finds Jessica on the brink of death at the bottom of the stairs. To me, it's quite obvious that Loudermilk didn't mean for her to get this roughed up, but due to his aggression, she ended up falling down the stairs. Loudermilk sees Blake as the only witness and chases him into the bathroom where he hides in the stall. While Loudermilk tries to force his way in, he ends up luring him out. So to survive, Blake ends up helping Loudermilk cover it up by hanging Jessica, making it look like suicide. At the point where they hang her, she is still alive, but barely. Blake's guilt comes from the fact that not only did he stay silent, but he actually helped Loudermilk cover it up. The murder of his best friend. Jessica never blamed him in her final moments. You can tell by how Blake's hallucinations of her are very helpful, telling you when the demon is near and showing you where to run or hide. So how does all this relate to Temple Gate, and how does this game tie into the first game? Because they are connected, but the game goes to great length to keep the ties blurred and abstract. Basically, Murkoff is also behind Temple Gate. Those bright flashes throughout the game are basically a different kind of morphogenic engine. This is what makes the residents have these visions and delusions. Also, Lynn doesn't give birth to anything in the end. Blake is hallucinating the child. In Whistleblower, there's a note that explains that women, when exposed to morphogenic therapy, will experience phantom pregnancies. This is what happened to Lynn. It's never really made clear what the purpose of the Temple Gate experiment is. I feel like the game's story would have been much better and more impactful if the ties were made clear in the game. Instead, most of what we know about the connection between these two games come from a tie-in comic. Anyways, this is what I have for you today. Goodbye.